As I sit here, typing these words out on my laptop with the ocean spray splashing my face, I almost can't believe it. The last few days have felt like nothing less than one long continuous nightmare that I could never awake from. It's what I imagine it must be like for someone in a coma, locked in endless sleep. But it's over. The nightmare is over. Before I tell you what happened, let me just say one thing to all of you reading this, all of you who did all you could to help me and gave me advice. I know I've said it so many times now that I probably sound like a broken record, but I need to say it one final time. Thank you. I will never forget any of you for everything you did for me, and if I can ever return the favour, I will. That being said, it's time. Time to tell you what happened. When the three of us woke up, it was still dark out. According to my wristwatch, it was only a little after 6 in the morning. None of us said a word to each other, only exchanging nervous but determined glances as we packed the things we thought we'd need into a single bag, including all the food and water we had left. As I shoved the final things in, Andrew came up beside me, holding out another sheet of paper on which he'd written something. "Nate, I'm so sorry about yesterday." I read the note and looked up at the man's somber face. I still felt the angry heat in me, but I pushed it down and simply nodded at him. Now wasn't the time to hold a grudge, regardless of whether it was deserved or not. I took the pen and wrote a message back. Let's just focus on getting out of here. Nothing else matters. He read it, then nodded, seeming a bit relieved. I cast one final look at the program which had been shoved underneath the door last night. It lay on the room's writing desk, the declaration of reaching port staring up at me like a tombstone. Freedom or death, I thought. One of them happens today. Steeling myself, I motioned to our barricade, which had gratefully managed to hold through the night. Trying to remain as quiet as possible, we pulled the chairs, nightstands, and other items away until the doorway was clear. I took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of fear and anticipation begin to rise, then reached out and took the doorknob in my hand. I looked up, locking my eyes with Andrew and Spencer, and they slowly nodded at me. Here we go. I turned the knob, pulling the door open. In silence, we crept down the hallway. It looked as deserted as always, though the shoes still sat next to the cabin doors. I became aware of one difference from yesterday, though, something that made the fear and uneasiness increase. The ship was no longer silent. The intercom had been turned on again, something during the night, and as I listened, I realized the first ever song that had played when we powered the ship up was filtering out from the speakers. You belong to me. I shivered slightly, but listening to the music strengthened my resolve. Yeah, we'll see about belonging to you, fuckers. Making sure the bag over my shoulder didn't make any sound, we entered the landing. The first thing I noticed was that a sign had been set up next to the floor's concierge desk. I stopped for a second to read it. Horse racing sign up. Next to it was an open ledger, inside which many people had signed their names along with their cabin numbers. My eyes flickered down the list, seeing many names that I didn't recognize. Ones of people who had passed from this world decades ago or longer. Then I froze. It felt like someone had dumped the frigid seawater down my back. My eyes read and reread the last 3 names on the sign-up list. I saw Will's name, the captain's name, and Vinny's. I closed my eyes and turned away from the ledger, feeling as though my emotions were about to overwhelm me. Seeing his name, knowing that all 3 of my crewmates were among them now, shattered a piece of my soul, especially because I knew there was nothing I could do for them. Not now. Someone patted me on the shoulder and I opened my eyes, turning to find Spencer standing beside me. He wore a grim expression on his face and looked from me to the ledger, having seen the same horrific sight I had. For a moment, I did nothing. Then I nodded at him, turning to follow him and Andrew up the stairs. The lifeboats were hooked up on the promenade deck, which is where we were heading. The plan was to hide the bag of supplies near the stern railing of the ship, behind a few of the giant cleats used for mooring. Then ready all the lifeboats on the starboard side of the ship to drop. Normally they would be slowly lowered from the davits via steel cables, but I noticed there was some sort of quick disconnect switch which would allow the small boat to simply free fall to the water. All of us knew damn well that the moment the ship's inhabitants realized what we were doing, they would send everything they had after us to stop us. And that meant the second we launched, the last of the lifeboats, we would have to quite literally run for our lives to the stern, snatching up the supplies before leaping overboard. From there it was simply a matter of taking it to one of the lifeboats, climbing inside and rowing like madness away from the scene. The idea conjured up an image from an old 80s horror movie I'd seen about a possessed ship, of it turning to run down its escaping prey. It was replaced by the horrific sight of the Queen Elizabeth coming about to do that, to do the same to us. I pray to God that it doesn't decide to do that, because we'd just be sitting ducks. Shaking the thought from the image from my mind, we reached the top stair of the promenade deck, looking around. The music continued to play, the song now changing to Mr. Sandman by the Chaudettes. Aside from that, the ship was silent in the gloom. Now that meant they hadn't had caught on to our plan yet, and that gave us more of a fighting chance. I spared a split-second glance at the captain's bloodstain, then turned towards the opposite direction. "We're doing this for you, Cap. All of you." "Come on," I whispered, the first words any of us had uttered all day. Motioning to them, I knelt down into a crouch and slowly began moving down the corridor, the 2 following close behind. As we reached a corner, a sign hanging overhead pointing the direction which showed the way to the outer deck, something filtered out from down the hall in the other direction. It was the direction of the theatre. It was the sound of laughter, not eerie, sinister laughter, but the genuine, infectious laughter of people who had been bowled over by something hilarious. Even still, that sound sent a chill down my back. They're watching a movie, I realized. For a moment I wondered if our lost crewmates were sitting beside them, watching. And I shook my head. Knock it off, Nate. I jerked my head, putting my fingers to my lips as we reached the door to outside. Feeling my entire body tense up, I reached out, grabbed the handle, slowly pulled it down. It opened, the smell of the ocean immediately rushing into my nostrils in the hall. Moving quickly, we stepped outside and closed the door behind us, Andrew easing the door shut as quietly as he could. Then he finally spoke, his whisper almost torn away by the whipping wind. "All right, let's get the supply bag down to the stern, and then get ready, this place is gonna go pop off when everything starts." Spencer nodded. "All right, let's do it," he whispered. Together, the 3 of us descended a few sets of stairs until we reached the stern deck. Thankfully, it seemed as deserted as the rest of the ship. Moving quickly, we scuttled over and set down the bag. Step 1 was complete. As we slowly began to back away, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up straight. I froze as the shiver which came with the sensation of being watched passed over me. My heart began to beat hard and fast in my chest. Oh shit. Swallowing, I slowly turned and looked at the mass of decks over our heads, expecting to see a shadowy figure staring down at me. No one was there. What do you see? Andrew hissed at me, staring up for a moment longer before shaking my head. I said, Nothing. I just thought we were being watched for a moment. Their faces paled slightly at my words, but they nodded. Come on, let's get back upstairs. We need to check the prime for quick releases on the lifeboats and then do one final check to make sure they're not near us. Then we do it. I saw the colour begin to come back to their faces, the fearful looks melting back into determined ones. They had until now. I shot a look off the side of a ship. The sun was beginning to raise itself over the horizon, the orange glow giving way to a yellow glare as it looked to be pulling itself out of the sea. Turning back, I jerked my head forwards. Let's go. We made our way back up the promenade deck and began readying our potential escape vessels to drop. It was extremely, almost painfully slow going, especially trying to be quiet. Some of the hinges had formed patches of rust, making the davits hard to swing out and the levers even harder to raise. But eventually, every single lifeboat on the starboard side of the Queen Elizabeth dangled high above the water, which moved slowly below. The three of us stopped for a moment to wipe our brows, and we allowed ourselves a small smile at our accomplishment. We might actually make it out of this, I thought. We might actually pull this off. But that thought sent a surge of hope, almost giddiness, to flow through me. When I get back home, I'm going to literally kneel down and kiss the ground beneath my feet, and I'm never setting foot on or in the ocean again. Now came the final task, making sure the coast was clear, and that we hadn't been spotted and swarmed. None of us had discussed this portion of the plan yet, mostly due to the fact of what it entailed. One of us had to sneak back inside the ship and give a last look, then signal the others to begin releasing the lifeboats. None of us wanted the less than envious task. I didn't blame the others for not volunteering, but after seeing that neither of them were going to step forward, I sighed reluctantly and said, "All right, I'll do it." Simultaneous looks of guilt and relief entered the other men's eyes, and after a moment in which I saw them inwardly fight with themselves, they nodded. I began to turn away when Spencer spoke. "Hey, Nate." I looked back, seeing the barely disguised fear on his face. Not fear for him, for me. "Yeah?" I asked. He took a deep breath and then answered, "Stay safe, man. Please." A small bit of gratitude at the gesture flooded me, and I nodded at him. "Look, just be ready for my signal." And with that, I opened the door and slipped back inside. Tension filled every fibre and sinew of muscle in my body as I crept forwards. Hearing the pounding of my heart inside my eardrums, the sweat began trickling down my face. Everything seemed the same. The music still played over the speakers, and the ship still remained silent. I didn't hear the laughter anymore. That could just be because whatever film they were watching now wasn't in the middle of a funny scene. At least, I hoped. I took another few steps forward, the T-junction ahead, straining my ears for any abnormal sound. still. It remained quiet. Maybe they don't really know what we're up to. Keeping my breathing as quiet and shallow as possible, I finally reached the T-junction, taking a single deep breath before stepping out into the middle of it. I cast a look in all the directions I could see. Nothing moved in the stillness. Time to leave. I turned and gave the two faces in the door's porthole a thumbs up, then crossed my arms and made a slicing motion. Both of them burst into elated grins and disappeared, dashing to begin dropping the boats as I turned to drop them. "Nice try, Nathan." The voice from over my right shoulder froze me on the spot, my feet rooting themselves to the floor. Every ounce of hope and happiness I had was sucked away from me like a loved one in the grip of a tsunami, replaced by a mixture of horror, fear, and dread. My breathing became ragged. I felt tears begin to spill from my eyes. Slowly, I turned my head to look behind me. Will stood there, looking as alive and human as he had the last time I'd seen him, next to the pool. He cocked his head, slowly giving it a shake as a sad, pitying smile played over his lips. It was a valiant effort, I'll give you that. You've impressed me. He jerked his head towards the door leading outside, to the last hope of my salvation. Especially getting those two bird brains to work together with you. The second voice spoke up from my right. But the game's over now, darling. My head swiveled to see that Diana now stood between me and the exit, and she wasn't alone. What looked like at least a dozen men, women and children stood beside and behind her, all wearing clothing from the mid-20th century. They all wore amused smiles on their faces, their eyes fixated on me. Behind them I could hear the dull thunk of lifeboats being released. "My dear boy, Nathan." The biggest chill yet ran up my spine, and I slowly turned around to find 3 of the 4 hallways packed with people. Hundreds, no, thousands, which stretched away and out of sight, wearing not only old clothing, but crew uniforms as well. Oh, they're all here. And then my eyes fixated on the man who'd spoken with the voice I'd heard through the radio that day, welcoming me aboard. He was dressed in a captain's uniform, a white cap sitting atop his head. I knew instantly who he was. It was the man that Andrew and Spencer had seen, had tried setting on fire and then running from, the captain of the Queen Elizabeth. He smiled an ear-to-ear smile that reminded me of the Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland. Only this grin wasn't going to be followed with raising any philosophical points or trying to cheer me up. This grin held a wicked hunger, and it made me feel as though I was staring at the devil himself. And then 2 figures stepped out beside him. 2 figures that made the blood drain from my face. The captain spoke again. "I think you know what to do now, everyone." And I finally wrenched my mouth open and screamed with all the air in my lungs as I watched him, Vinny, the captain, my captain, and all of them melt into the shadowy figures that had stalked and pursued us from the day we'd stepped aboard. I didn't wait for them to make a move. I turned and ran. I ran in the only direction that was available to me, back down the hallway that led to the lounge and stairs. Sparing a glance behind me, I screamed again as what I can only describe as a maelstrom flew after me. the maddening whispers, screams and laughs emanating from them, melting together into what I can only assume is what hell itself sounds like. Running faster than I ever had in my life, I reached the landing and made a dash for the stairs. But I'd only taken a few steps down when I heard even more of the infernal noise rising up from down below. I peered over the banister and down the space between the stairwell, and I felt a new surge of terror as I saw even more swirling figures surging up the stairs. "Oh shit," I yelled, turning and sprinting back up. I emerged back onto the landing, just as the figures which had originally started chasing me entered. Black, soot-like arms reached out to snatch me, and I ducked, managing to dodge them with less than an inch to spare. I ran towards the open door to the lounge, my momentary thoughts of running for the observation room squashed as I heard yet still more whispers coming from around the corner of the hallway to it. I had no other choice aside from turning around and letting them take me, and that was not happening. I burst into the lounge, almost tripping over one of the chairs that still lay on its side, and racing for the crew hallway we'd first entered the ship from. As I made it to the centre of the room, I could see it, the door hanging slightly open. I have to make it. It's my only way to escape. A momentary surge of hope filled me as I reached it, heaving it open, and then died as a shadowy hand thrust out from a darkened companionway, trying to snatch me and pull me in. I stumbled backwards, almost falling as I turned to run the other way. Panic and fear were what solely were driving me now as I made it to the middle of the room and skidded to a stop. I was surrounded. Completely surrounded. I turned around in a circle, feeling the strongest wave of horror burst forth as I saw the shadowy figures around me. There was nowhere left for me to run. I began to shake as I watched them slowly close the circle upon me. Tears began to fall from my eyes as the grim final reality of my situation slammed into my head. There's nowhere for me to run anymore. Nowhere for me to go. I'm not getting out of this. I'm gonna die here. I just hope Spencer and Andrew managed to make it off. And then, one more thought. God, please don't let it hurt. And I closed my eyes. Nate? My eyes shot open, flicking over the shoulders of the shadowy figures as they stopped and turned back to look at Andrew and Spencer, who had dashed to the doorway of the lounge. Panicked looks on their faces. Their eyes found mine, and I saw their faces go pale as they saw the situation, and then to my horror, some of the figures turned and began to move towards them. "No!" I began screaming. "Hey! I'm here. You wanted me? Come take me. Leave them alone." The figures turned back to me, and I heard the whispers morph until the only sound I could hear was them laughing. That's when I heard Andrew scream at me. "Nate! Look out!" I looked up to see him pointing his finger. Behind me, I spun round, catching a glimpse of something rocketing towards me. With a terrified realization, I recognized it as one of the giant lamps that had been set up in the four corners of the lounge, and at the speed the huge marble and glass behemoth was travelling, I would be killed instantly if it hit me. That's what it was meant. It meant to kill me. I didn't think. There wasn't time. I simply turned and dove for the floor. The carpet slammed into my face as I felt the monstrosity whiz less than a foot over my head. Seconds later, I heard it slam into the opposite wall with a thunderous crash. For a moment, I could do nothing but lay there. The shock of not being dead was all I could feel. Then I got to my feet. Andrew and Spencer's faces were horrified. Their expressions pulling their features tight, just how close I'd come to death. They could do nothing but stare fixedly at me. But as they did, I realized something. Something that sent a bolt of hope through me. Some of the figures were still moving towards the two men. Quite a few of them, in fact. Enough that they had made a mistake and left a narrow but noticeable gap in the circle. And again, I ran. Instantly the figures realized their error and attempted to plug the hole in their line, but they were just a moment too slow as I managed to sprint between them, feeling the tips of their fingers brush the collar of my jacket. A new sound rose from them as I flew out of their grasp, one that spurred me to move even faster. A single, unanimous scream of rage. Rage at having had me dead to rights, then letting me slip out of their grasp. As I broke free, I shot another look upwards towards the others. I'd been ready to yell at them to run, to head for the stern of the ship, but I saw I didn't need to. They were already bolting for the exit. I felt fresh tears begin to well up in my eyes, this time ones of hope. I crashed into the corner as I saw them ripping open the exit door, sheer adrenaline powering me on as I raced to catch up to them. Come on, you're so close. Move. I spared a look behind me, fear adding more fuel to my escape as I saw the massive figures spill around the corner. I'd just come from there. They were desperate to keep us from escaping. I slammed into the door, yanking on the handle as it flew open. The sun momentarily blinding my eyes, it slammed into the outer wall with a crash, and as I caught sight of Andrew and Spencer racing down the stairs, they shot a terrified look back at the sound. I was too focused on staying ahead of the horde to say anything. The only sound I made was the laboured breathing I made as I took the stairs, two at a time. The stern section came into view as I raced down the final stairs, and I saw Andrew snatching up the supply bag. The screams of anger and desperation behind me now filled the air, drowning out the cry of the gulls overhead. I saw my two crewmates take 2 bounding steps, jumping and pushing off the stern railing with their feet. Then they disappeared out of sight. A moment later, I jumped as well. The frigid cold water took my breath away as it enveloped me. For a moment I thrashed underwater, then my head broke the surface. I spluttered out seawater and looked around. The lifeboat. I saw that our plan had worked. At least half a dozen of the small boats had successfully survived their fall and floated away from the ship. I began swimming for them as hard as I could, seeing the others doing the same. Behind me came the biggest scream yet. I sped a glance over my shoulder to see the Queen Elizabeth steaming away from us. For whatever reason, they couldn't pursue us. The sight slammed the reality home to me. We made it. We're free. Moments later, we reached the closest boat and hauled ourselves on board. For a few moments we could do nothing, just lay there, gasping for air as the sun rose higher into the sky. The warmth it radiated felt like heaven. Then, slowly, I heard Spencer begin to chuckle triumphantly. Andrew joined in a moment later, and finally, so did I. It was all we were able to do, being so emotionally fried and mentally exhausted from the whole experience. You know what? I'm sorry. But I can't lie to you. Not after all you did for me. I know that's what you wanted though, wasn't it? You wanted to read about how the 3 of us managed to beat the odds. Managed to escape the nightmare ship and are floating somewhere in the Atlantic. That we're going to be alright. Am I right? Well, I'm afraid I'm going to have to burst that bubble. I can imagine you're sitting there at home now probably, or maybe listening to this on headphones in the car, All of you. Wait, what? You'll scream, with a shocked expression on your faces. He lied at the very start? But did I? I said at the start of this story that it was finally over. I said what I felt was the nightmare was finally over. I never said I escaped, though. You only took it to mean as much. The truth is, everything I told you actually happened. Until the point where I turned to see the giant lamp flying towards me. I never dove out of the way. I didn't have time. It slammed into me with the force of a 747. I can still remember it. I remember flying across the room before being crushed into the wall. Truth be told, it was so quick that I didn't even feel anything. I didn't suffer, if that makes you feel any better. I also didn't lie about standing up to see horrified looks on Andrew and Spencer's faces. They did indeed have horrified looks, and they did look back terrified as I slammed open the door to chase after them. Because I was rushing after them to tell them how wrong we'd been. How wrong we'd all been. I realised it as soon as I stood up, looking down at myself and seeing the shadows clinging to my body. They were right. Will, Diana, the captain, they were all right. About it being beautiful. About the past not dying. The other reality. All of it. There truly was never anything to fear. Because I feel so happy. I never have to worry about death again. About growing old. I never have to worry about things changing. About the world moving on. Whether I want it to or not. To tell you the truth, I feel silly for being afraid this whole time. If I'd known the truth, I never would have run. I would have let them take me. I didn't lie about them escaping. Andrew and Spencer, I mean. They really did leap off the stern of the ship into the water, swam to the lifeboat. I can still see them now, actually. I can see them trying to row away as I lay on a sun lounger on the promenade deck with the others. The laptop I left in our cabin. Diana and Will are smiling and laughing together as they share a drink on my left. And Vinny, the captain, are lounging on my right. My heart warms as I see them shoot me smiles, almost as warm as the beating summer sun. But I can't help feeling sad for Andrew and Spence. They're never going to be able to experience this. Just like Wyatt and Kenny won't. I even asked the captain of the Queen Elizabeth if they could return, if I could try and convince him to come back to us. But he said because they'd tried to burn the ship down it wouldn't be possible. As much as that sucks, I can see his point. But I can't help but feel a little bit bad for them. Seeing their little lifeboat get further and further away as the storm rolls in. I hope they don't suffer too much. We're so close to arriving in New York City now. I'm excited. When I look over the railing towards the bow, I can see the first glimpses of it on the horizon. And it looks amazing. I'm seeing it as it did, and as it is, in 1956, without any of the ugly modern buildings ruining it. Diana told us she's going to show us around the city. Then she's going to take us to a home in Los Angeles. We're even going to see Elvis perform. I can't wait. After the traditional horse race and party tonight, of course. Which brings me to something I want to tell you all about. You see, Diana also told me that when newcomers arrive, they do have to do something. They need to contribute to help them. The Queen Elizabeth will eventually leave New York, heading back out for open sea. She'll cruise between here, over to England, and then back, through the Atlantic where we first came across her, crossing from this world to our, well, to yours. thanks to the tether that the floating hotel her sister ship became. Because after enough time, the four of us will stop being new faces to everyone here, and they'll stop being new faces to us. And it gets ever so lonely not seeing any new faces. So I'd like to do something for you before I finally lose the signal, the computer's back to you, before we fully cross over. The entire reason I'm posting this last update. Remember at the start when I said if I could ever return the favour for you all you've done, you know, thank you for all the advice. If I could ever do anything in return for you, I would. Well, there is one thing. I'd like to extend all of you an invitation, if you're able, to charter a boat and sail for the Flemish Cap, or for the route the ship used to take in your world across the Atlantic. Look for the darkened storm clouds and steer a course for them. You'll be battered about a great deal, unfortunately. It won't be pleasant. But eventually, you'll see the great ship appear on the horizon. Steer a course for her and come on board, where we are waiting to welcome you with open arms. We're always looking for new people to join us.